Why did they laugh at her name? That was the first question that burned inside her chest as she stood silent in the briefing room, the gray-green of her eyes fixed forward. Echo Tempest, the squadron leader had scoffed. A few others chuckled, amused by how soft it sounded, like something torn out of a bad movie script. But Emily Sorrell didn't laugh. She never did. She simply stood there, 20 years old, her uniform immaculate, her voice too quiet for anyone to hear unless they leaned close. That quiet had cost her 6 months in the 47th Fighter Squadron, and still they called her the Ghost. Not because she was invisible in the sky, but because she was invisible in their eyes. And yet she stayed steady, never snapping back, never defending herself, only holding herself with the discipline that had gotten her here, despite every reason she should have failed. The air in the briefing room felt heavy. It smelled of coffee, sweat, and stale laughter. Then suddenly sirens. Shrieking. Piercing. The kind of sound that turned blood to ice. Red lights flooded the hall, flashing across startled faces. And when the door slammed open, Lieutenant Colonel Corinne Doyle's expression said everything. "This is no exercise," she shouted. 24 enemy fighters inbound. 3 minutes to San Diego. The laughter gone. Chairs screeched back. Helmets were grabbed. Every pilot moved at once. And Emily, she didn't move. She just listened. Target updates came rapid, desperate. The naval base, downtown, the airport, Hollywood Hills, Santa Monica. 5 targets, millions of lives. And only 12 American Raptors to stop them. The math didn't work, everyone knew it. Still, the squadron leader, Harland, called out assignments, pairing off men, sending them running. Mitchell and Carter, Alpha Flight, Blake and Grant, Bravo, Kim and Alvarez, Charlie. Names, orders, noise. And then someone shouted, "What about Sorrell?" A pause. A silence that cut sharper than the alarms. "She stays grounded," Harland barked. "Too much risk." That was the verdict. Dismissed before she had even strapped in. Invisible again. But on the runway, something else stirred. Engines thundered as 11 Raptors roared to life, rolling toward launch. And quietly, unseen in the chaos, a 12th jet began to move. Aircraft 64,108. Echo Tempest. It rolled forward without clearance. The canopy closed. The turbines screamed alive. "Damn it, Sorrell," Harland's voice thundered across the comms. "You are not cleared." But her reply was faint, so faint he almost missed it. "Americans are about to die." And then she was airborne. Climbing into the California sky, the sunlight flashing across steel wings. Alone. While the rest of the squadron was still strapping in, she was already cutting through the clouds, already racing into the unknown. "Damn it," Harland cursed again, slamming his visor down, strapping into his own seat. "She's going to get herself killed." But there was no time for outrage. The others followed. One by one, 11 Raptors streaked upward, their afterburners blazing like blue fire. Up there, beyond the horizon, hostile radar signatures lit the screens. 24 enemy fighters, splitting, closing fast. "Targets confirmed," Control reported. "Airport downtown, Hollywood Hills, Santa Monica Naval Base. Casualties could be in the millions." Harland froze as he scanned his scope. The enemy had spread into 5 clusters. 4 toward San Diego Airport. 5 diving on downtown. 4 streaking toward Hollywood Hills. 3 cutting toward Santa Monica. And 8 locked onto the naval base. 8. Against what? "Alpha Flight, handle the airport," Harland ordered, his voice firm though his chest was tight. "Bravo, cover downtown, Charlie Hollywood, Delta Santa Monica." "And the naval base?" "The group of 8. "I'll take them myself," Harlan said through clenched teeth. Even he knew what that meant. One American pilot against 8 fighters. A suicide run. And then that quiet voice again. Almost lost in the static. I'm going after the naval base group. Harlan snapped back instantly. Sorrel, you are not cleared for this. That's an order. Silence. For a moment, he thought she'd back down. But then her voice, still calm, still faint, cut through sharper than any shout. 8 enemy aircraft are seconds from sinking American warships. Waiting on authorization won't stop them. And on his screen, her blip moved. Fast. Too fast. She wasn't waiting. She was already diving in. Sure, Harlan's voice cracked with something he hadn't expected, fear. You're going against 8 fighters alone. It's suicide. Her reply was so soft, so steady, it felt like a knife. Maybe so, but there are American sailors down there. Then she was gone, racing straight into what no one believed possible. And what unfolded next would become the kind of story whispered in hangars, retold in classrooms, carried in the silence of veterans who had seen the impossible with their own eyes. But before that legend could be born, there was only a woman. Alone in the sky, facing 8 killers with no one at her side. And the question burning in every mind was the same. Could the quietest voice in the room really be the storm that would save them all? What kind of madness drives one pilot to face 8? That was the thought burning in every headset as her blip broke away on the radar. 1 Raptor against 8 enemy fighters. No one spoke it aloud, but the truth hung heavy. She wasn't coming back. Emily knew it too. Her hands tightened on the throttle, sweat already prickling under her gloves. Her heartbeat thundered against her ribs, loud enough she swore the cockpit could hear it. Every calculation in her head said she should turn back. No pilot survived odds like this. Not in training. Not in history. And yet, through the canopy glass, she saw them. Far below, sprawled across Coronado Bay, the USS Gerald R lay anchored, its deck crawling with sailors who had no idea death was seconds away. 3 destroyers flanked her, vulnerable, massive, targets too tempting for the enemy to ignore. Those sailors weren't numbers. They weren't radar blips. They were lives. Men and women laughing, working, writing letters home, unaware that missiles were already locked on them. Her throat tightened. She thought of her father's stories, how he'd worked the docks when she was a child, his hands cracked, his back broken, but still proud of his service years in the Navy. She remembered asking him once, "What's the worst feeling in combat?" And he'd said quietly, "Knowing you couldn't stop it." Not today. Not while she could still breathe. Emily pushed her jet higher, climbing into the sun. Her call sign, mocked for months, now whispered in her ears as if it had been waiting for this exact moment. Echo Tempest. Silent, sudden, deadly. The enemy formation was tight. 8 fighters flying with discipline, locked in on the ships below. They never saw her coming. Her first missile streaked out like lightning. 1 heartbeat, nothing. The next, an eruption of fire, a plume of black smoke. The enemy leader was gone before he even had the chance to shout a warning. "Splash 1," she whispered, her voice calm, almost too calm. The squadron's chatter exploded in her ear. Jesus Christ, did she just? She hit their lead. Control confirmed that strike. But Emily wasn't listening. Her second missile locked and launched, ripping through the enemy's electronic warfare jet, the one designed to blind American radars. It detonated midair, scattering fire across the blue, leaving the rest of the squadron suddenly naked. 7 became 6. And panic set in. The tight enemy wedge dissolved instantly, the discipline that had carried them crumbling under the invisible strike. Emily had turned their order into chaos. Her breathing slowed. Her heart didn't. Her eyes tracked every evasive dive, every roll, every engine flare. She didn't chase recklessly. She anticipated, she predicted, she waited. Her third missile streaked into a jet, diving for the carrier's deck. She could almost see the pilot's head tilt, aligning his strike. And then he was gone, obliterated in the air, fragments tumbling into the sea before a single bomb could leave his wings. Her comms crackled, Harlan's voice tight, desperate. "Sorrel, break off. You've done enough. Break off now." But she didn't answer. She couldn't. Every second spent speaking was a second closer to American sailors dying. Her fourth strike targeted the pilot trying to rally the broken enemy. She heard his chatter, sharp and commanding, trying to pull his squadron back into formation. He never finished his sentence. Her missile silenced him in fire. Her fifth shot was the most dangerous yet. An enemy fighter cut low, sliding behind the destroyer USS Mitchell, hiding in its shadow, betting the Americans wouldn't risk firing so close to their own. Emily's hand trembled, just for a second. If she missed by even a fraction, she could rip a hole into her own navy. She steadied her breath. Fired. The jet disintegrated. The destroyer untouched. Her comms filled with stunned silence. Even the Americans who'd mocked her hours ago had no words. 6 kills. 2 left. 1 tried to flee, breaking hard for international skis, afterburners screaming. But Emily was faster. Her missile chased him down, relentless, until he was nothing but smoke falling into the Pacific. The last one didn't run. The last one dove straight into a suicide dive at the carrier itself. Emily's pulse surged. Her screen filled with warning lights as she pushed her jet harder than she ever had before, tearing into a descent so steep it rattled her teeth. She squeezed the trigger. Her cannon erupted in a roar of tracers, streams of fire cutting the sky. At less than 100 yards, her rounds found their mark. The enemy fighter exploded in a blossom of flame, fragments raining harmlessly into the sea, just seconds before it would have turned a warship into a funeral pyre. Silence. 8 hostile jets. Gone. And 1 quiet voice over the comms. Naval group neutralized, all ships secure, moving to assist other flights. She said it like it was nothing. Like she hadn't just done the impossible. Like she hadn't carved herself into legend in under 2 minutes. For 3 heartbeats, no one spoke. Not Harlan. Not the squadron. Not even control. And then the voices erupted. She took out 8. In under 2 minutes. Holy hell, echo tempest. But Emily didn't reply. Her eyes were already searching for the next target. Because while she'd saved the sailors below, her brothers in arms were still locked in battles they couldn't win. And deep inside her chest, where fear still lived, something else began to stir. Not pride. Not triumph. Resolve. The kind of resolve that asked no permission. The kind that didn't wait for approval. Because Emily Sorrel knew one truth more than any other. Sometimes silence doesn't ask to be heard. It simply acts. And tonight, silence had become the storm. How much can one person endure before breaking? That was the question echoing in Emily's head as her jet sliced through the sky, engines howling, radar buzzing with endless hostile signals. She'd destroyed 8. 8 fighters that should have annihilated an entire naval fleet. And yet the war was far from over. Her comms were alive with desperate voices. Alpha Flight, we're overwhelmed at the airport, 4 bogies inbound. Bravo, downtown is breaking, buildings are already burning. Charlie, Hollywood, under attack. Delta, Santa Monica's blending in with civilian traffic. Every voice carried strain. Every voice carried fear. And beneath it all, Emily's silence. She checked her radar. 4 blips were already over San Diego International Airport. The place was packed, passenger jets on the ground, terminals filled with families, children pressing their faces against glass, travelers rushing for gates. If those enemy fighters reached the fuel depots, the towers, the crowded tarmac, the thought made her stomach twist. She pushed her throttle forward. The afterburners lit, a streak of fire cutting the sky. Her hands trembled slightly on the stick, not from exhaustion, not yet, but from the weight. The weight of knowing one mistake here wasn't about her life. It was about thousands. She remembered standing in that very airport once. A child with a backpack too big for her shoulders, holding her mother's hand, staring out at the runways where giant aircraft lifted like miracles into the sky. She had wondered then what it would feel like to be the one inside, pulling the stick, breaking gravity. And now she was racing to decide whether all those children would ever get to wonder the same. Her radar screamed. Target lock. 4 enemy fighters. The first was diving toward a passenger jet, 300 civilians trapped inside, waiting for takeoff. Her pulse spiked. Her missile streaked. The explosion was sudden, brutal, visible from the windows where terrified passengers had been watching death close in. They saw the threat vanish in fire. They saw a lone Raptor flash past, wings shimmering in sunlight. And though they didn't know her name, their lives now belonged to her. Splash 1, Emily whispered. Her voice calm. Her chest anything but. The second fighter rolled toward the control tower. Emily's jaw clenched. If that tower fell, the sky would become chaos, planes circling with no guidance, thousands stranded, crashes inevitable. She didn't hesitate. Her missile tore through the jet midroll, scattering wreckage harmlessly into the open air. Splash 2. The third fighter pulled lower, lining up on the fuel depot. Her radar screamed warnings. If that target went, it wouldn't just destroy the airport. It would ignite a fireball that could swallow half of San Diego. Emily's hand shook on the trigger. She didn't even realize she'd been holding her breath until the missile launched. The explosion ripped the enemy apart before he could release. The depot stood untouched. Splash 3. Her comms crackled with disbelief. She's clearing the whole group. In under 30 seconds. Echo Tempest, Jesus, she's saving everything. But Emily barely heard them. Because the last fighter wasn't running. He was diving straight at another passenger jet, parked at the gate, families pressed inside, mothers cradling infants, children with their faces against the windows. It wasn't just an attack. It was a suicide strike. Emily's teeth grit. Her eyes narrowed. She fired. This time not a missile. Her cannon. Tracer rounds erupted, streams of fire cutting the sky, hammering through the enemy until his fuselage shredded. The wreckage plummeted, but Emily's rounds had done their job. The enemy never reached his target. The passenger jet sat untouched. The families inside were alive. For a moment, silence filled her cockpit. Not outside. Outside, the radios still screamed, alarms still blared, the world was still burning. But inside, Emily exhaled. Airport group neutralized, she said, steady as stone. All civilian flights secure, moving to assist downtown. Her words were clinical. But her hands trembled as they left the trigger. Because she knew how close it had been. A few seconds later, a few feet shorter. And she wouldn't have been announcing victory. She would have been watching fire consume families who had never known her name. Her radar blinked downtown. 5 hostile jets ripping through the financial district. Her chest tightened again. She banked hard, streaking toward the city. The sun caught the edges of the skyline as she descended, and through her canopy she saw it. The towers, the plazas, the endless glass walls. And she saw fire already burning, smoke rising. Civilians ran through the streets. Cars clogged intersections. People screamed, pointed upward, terrified of the black dots cutting across the sky. And in the middle of it, Emily dove in. Her Raptor slipped into the concrete canyon, weaving between skyscrapers at speeds that blurred the world. Office workers pressed to windows, watching in disbelief as a lone American jet hunted through their city like a hawk through stone cliffs. Her first missile found a fighter diving on Emerald Plaza. 8,000 people inside. 1 second they were in the crosshairs. The next, the jet was gone in fire. Her second missile destroyed another hiding behind Symphony Towers, using civilians as cover. Emily's precision spared every life on the ground. Her third missile streaked into a jet locked on One America Plaza, the tallest building downtown, where a single strike would have shattered the skyline. The explosion lit the glass walls like fire. But the tower stood. Her fourth target tried to flee at street level, weaving between traffic, sending civilians scattering. Emily followed, her cannon spitting fire so close that people on sidewalks felt the heat of her tracers. The enemy jet crashed in fragments, harmless to those below. The last fighter dove in desperation toward Sharp Memorial Hospital. A suicide run. Emily's breath caught. Her finger squeezed. The missile struck true. The hospital still stood. The patients inside lived. Downtown group neutralized, she said, her voice even. All civilians safe, moving to Hollywood Hills. And then, only then, did the squadron go silent. Not with disbelief anymore. Not with panic. But with awe. Because in less than 6 minutes, the pilot they'd mocked had saved an airport, a naval base, and now an entire city. And still she flew on. Still she refused to stop. And somewhere, buried beneath all the adrenaline and terror, Emily's heart whispered the truth she dared not speak. She was no longer fighting for survival. She was fighting for redemption. What happens when war comes for the places we think untouchable? That question hovered in the smoke as Emily's Raptor cut across the coastline, banking toward the hills where the city shimmered beneath California sunlight. Downtown still burned behind her. The hospital still stood. The airport was safe. The naval base alive. But this fight wasn't over. Not yet. Her radar pulsed, 4 enemy fighters above the Hollywood Hills. Not aiming at warships. Not aiming at terminals. But at something less tangible, more fragile. Homes, families, the heart of America's dream factory. Through the canopy she glimpsed it. The sprawl of neighborhoods. The white glint of the Hollywood sign. The maze of studios where ordinary men and women clocked in, never imagining that a jet could bring death down like lightning from a clear sky. Her comms crackled with desperation. Charlie flight, we're hit, we've lost one, 2 bogies pushing toward the studios. Delta, Santa Monica's under fire, we can't hold them. The voices bled together. Her squadron was unraveling. Every group was fighting for survival. And yet Emily flew alone. Her hands were steady, but inside her chest her heart was breaking. She thought of the children, not just the sailors, not just the passengers at the airport, not just the office workers behind glass towers, but children in living rooms, children running down driveways, children watching cartoons in Hollywood homes with no idea that death streaked above them. The radar blip spread wide, splitting over neighborhoods. She picked the first, descending on Pacific Film Studios. Her missile fired. The explosion split the sky, the jet torn apart before it could release its payload. Her second lock caught another fighter banking over horizon pictures. Her shot threaded between hills, through air heavy with smog, and struck with surgical precision. The studio remained untouched. Two left. Her pulse hammered. The third dove lower, weaving between rooftops, trying to vanish in the sprawl of residential streets. Emily followed, her Raptor thundering overhead, shadows racing across homes where families looked up, stunned as jets streaked over their yards. Her cannon burst. Tracer fire ripped through the hostel before he could level out. The wreckage crashed harmlessly into empty brush. The fourth fighter tried something bolder. He cut toward the Hollywood sign itself, an act of pure symbolism, an attack meant to burn into history. Emily pushed her jet harder, feeling the strain in her bones. Her missile tore through him in mid-dive. The hillside shook with the explosion, but the letters stood tall, unbroken. "Hollywood Group neutralized," she said softly into her comm. "All studios and homes secure, moving to Pacific Beach." Her words were simple, but in the silence that followed, her squadron understood what they were hearing. She wasn't just saving lives anymore. She was saving symbols. She was shielding the places that carried memory, laughter, and culture. She was fighting not only for survival, but for the soul of a city. And yet inside, Emily felt none of that triumph. Her hands still trembled. Her breath still caught. Because every time she destroyed one of them, she saw flashes, faces that could have been her own squadmates, young men who had once believed in something, now turned into weapons. She never celebrated. She never cheered. Because in her heart she knew. Every victory was still a grave. Her radar screamed again. 3 more bogeys. Pacific Beach. And this time, something inside her cracked. She had been moving so fast, striking so hard, she hadn't given herself time to feel. But now she saw the pier. Families crowded along its wooden planks. Children on rides, the Ferris wheel spinning slow and bright. Couples eating ice cream, friends laughing in the salt air. And above them, death was circling. She clenched her teeth. She wouldn't let them die screaming. Not while she still had fire left in her wings. The first fighter leveled on the amusement park. Her missile streaked, annihilating it before families even had time to look up. The second cut low toward the crowded beaches. Her tracers tore through him, fragments scattering harmlessly into the ocean. The third, desperate, dove straight for the Ferris wheel, as if trying to drag joy itself into the fire. Emily didn't think. She fired. The jet burst apart in a blaze of smoke and flame, the debris vanishing into the Pacific as the Ferris wheel kept turning, children still laughing, parents still smiling, unaware of how close the storm had come. Her voice returned steady, even as her chest threatened to cave in. Pacific Beach Group neutralized, all civilians safe, all hostiles destroyed. And then silence. For the first time since the sirens had sounded, the radios fell quiet. No enemy contacts. No screams for help. Just the sound of American engines roaring over a city still alive. Emily lowered her gaze. The smoke of battle still clung to the horizon. Fires burned, debris floated in the sea. But the city still stood. Millions still breathed. And though she'd never admit it aloud, for the first time, she felt the faintest flicker of something warm. Not pride. Not glory. Hope. What happens after the storm breaks? That was the question hanging in the silence, as 12 Raptors circled above San Diego, the fires still smoldering beneath them. For 8 minutes, the sky had been a battlefield. Now it was quiet. Too quiet. Emily leveled her jet, her breath still ragged though her voice remained steady. "All hostiles destroyed," she repeated calmly. civilian areas secure, all military assets intact. But she could feel it, the weight pressing against her chest, the truth she didn't dare speak. She was exhausted. Her arms ached. Her hands trembled inside her gloves. And for the first time since she had taken off without clearance, she allowed herself to think, I shouldn't be alive. Her calm stayed silent. Not from interference, not from fear, but from awe. 24 enemy fighters. Neutralized. In less than 8 minutes. By one quiet pilot who had been told to stay on the ground. Finally, Harlan's voice broke through. All flights returned to base. It wasn't the voice of command anymore. It wasn't the bark of authority. It was something else, low, reverent, touched with disbelief. And then, after a pause, came words that shifted everything. Echo Tempest, you have the lead on landing approach. The squadron follows you home. Emily's throat tightened. For months, she had been the one told to wait, to watch, to stay behind. Now, every jet fell into formation behind her. The men who had laughed at her call sign only hours before now trusted her to bring them down safe. She said nothing. She simply led. The runway at Miramar shimmered below them, lined with emergency crews, smoke still curling in the distance. As her Raptor touched down, tires screeching against the asphalt, she exhaled the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. One by one, the others followed, a line of steel and fire returning from the storm. When her canopy lifted, the California air hit her face like a wave. Hot, heavy, real. She climbed out, her boots striking the ladder, her legs trembling though she forced them to stay steady. Around her, ground crews froze, staring up at her with wide eyes. Word had already spread. Everyone knew. The woman mocked as too quiet, that morning had saved a city. Inside the debriefing hall, silence met her again. The kind that comes not from dismissal, but from respect. Harlan stood at the front, a stack of reports in his hand. His eyes scanned the numbers, but his voice faltered as he read. 24 confirmed kills, he said slowly. All by Lieutenant Emily Sorrell. He lifted his gaze. San Diego International saved. 50,000 civilians protected. Downtown San Diego secured. 300,000 spared. Hollywood Hills defended. Studios and homes safe. Pacific Beach shielded. Thousands alive. The naval base intact. The carrier USS Gerald R. 3 destroyers, 8,000 sailors, all saved. The room stayed silent. No smirks. No chuckles. Only wide eyes and clenched jaws. Captain Mitchell rose first. His voice was low, steady. Ma'am, this morning we mocked your call sign. This afternoon you saved every pilot here and the city we swore to defend. Lieutenant Carter followed, his words carrying disbelief edged with awe. 24 kills in 8 minutes. That's not skill. That's something else. That's the kind of thing they'll teach at flight school for decades. Then Hughes, once her loudest critic, stood with something broken in his voice. My sister works downtown, in one of those towers you saved. She called me, thanking me for serving, but I had to tell her it wasn't me, it was you. Emily's gaze lowered. Her reply was quiet, the same as it always had been. Just doing my job, sir, that's why we're here. The silence that followed was unlike any she'd ever known. Not empty, not hostile, but filled with something new. Respect. Harlan moved closer, his face unreadable, his steps heavy. For a moment Emily braced, half expecting reprimand, punishment for breaking orders. But instead he reached up, peeled the squadron patch from his own shoulder and placed it in her hand. Sorrell, he said quietly, as of now you're not just a flight lead, you're squadron commander. After what I saw today, no one is more fit. Emily's breath caught. For the first time, she smiled. Not broad, not triumphant, but soft, quiet, the kind of smile that said, I didn't need them to believe me. I only needed them to see. Thank you, sir, she whispered. I won't let anyone down. But everyone in that room already knew she wouldn't. Later, when the squadron returned to the runway for their next patrol, the formation looked different. Echo Tempest wasn't trailing at the back anymore. She was at the front, leading. And behind her, 11 Raptors followed without question. Because the storm that had saved San Diego was now their commander. At altitude, Harlan's voice cut through the comms, no longer sharp, no longer mocking. Echo Tempest, you have the lead. And for the first time, Emily answered with confidence the whole sky could hear. Roger that, squadron. Echo Tempest has the lead. I'll bring us home. The ridicule was finished. The respect was earned. And the legend had just begun. How do you sleep after saving a city? That was the question that followed Emily long after the engines cooled, long after the cheers faded, long after the adrenaline bled away. The base was quiet that night. Too quiet. She lay awake in her bunk, staring at the ceiling. Every time she closed her eyes, she didn't see triumph. She saw fire. She saw the wreckage of jets she had torn apart. She saw faces she would never know, pilots who had once strapped in with the same kind of conviction she had, only for her to end their stories in seconds. 24 kills. The number circled her mind like a vulture. Her squadmates called it legendary. But to her, it felt like a confession. Her fingers curled against the blanket. She remembered her father's words again, back when she was just a girl who thought fighter jets were poetry in motion. Combat isn't about who's stronger, Emily. It's about who can carry the weight afterward. The weight was here now. Heavy, relentless. In the darkness, she whispered to herself, as if to steady the storm still clawing inside her chest. Just doing my job. But this time, even she didn't believe it. Morning came. The California sun cut across the hangars, blindingly bright, as if mocking the shadows that lingered in her thoughts. The squadron gathered again. The same men who had once ridiculed her now stood straighter when she entered. Their eyes followed her not with mockery, but with something new. Expectation. Harlan's voice carried through the room. Today, Echo Tempest leads. It was simple. A sentence. But one that changed everything. Emily gave no speech. No rallying cry. She simply nodded, her expression unreadable, her voice calm. Understood. Inside, though, doubt gnawed. Leadership wasn't about flying alone. It wasn't about shouldering the impossible and somehow surviving. It was about guiding others, keeping them alive, when she knew all too well that even the best didn't always make it home. As the squadron strapped in for patrol, Emily sat in her cockpit, canopy lowered, hands resting on the controls. Her reflection stared back faintly from the glass. She didn't see the legend they whispered about. She saw the same quiet girl who had always been overlooked, always been doubted. The engines roared to life. 12 Raptors taxied forward. This time, no one questioned her. No one told her to stay grounded. Echo Tempest, take us up, Control called. Her reply was steady, but her chest tightened as she spoke. Roger that, all Raptors on me. The formation lifted into the sky, sunlight glinting across steel wings. From the ground, they looked like a single flock moving as one, her at the front, the others in line behind her. At altitude, Harlan's voice cut across the channel, softer than it had ever been. Don't forget, Sorrel, you don't carry this alone anymore. We follow your lead. The word struck deeper than he knew. Because Emily had always carried it alone. Her silence wasn't shyness, it was survival. She remembered the academy, the way her instructors had told her she wasn't aggressive enough, too soft-spoken, too hesitant. She remembered the day she overheard two senior pilots laughing in the hall, calling her the ghost who will wash out. She hadn't confronted them, she hadn't argued. She had gone back to her room, stared at her reflection, and told herself that storms didn't need to announce themselves. They arrived when no one expected. And yesterday, she had proved it true. Now flying with her squadron tucked behind her, she realized something else. Her silence was no longer just a shield. It was a responsibility. Because every order she gave, every decision she made, would ripple into the lives of the men behind her. Her radar stayed clear. No enemy contacts. Just routine patrol. And yet her chest stayed heavy. Because the battle wasn't only in the sky anymore. It was inside her. What do you do when the very thing that earns you respect also steals pieces of you you'll never get back? She didn't have the answer yet. But she knew this. Sometimes, survival isn't about the missiles you fire or the enemies you destroy. It's about whether you can keep flying the next day, with the ghosts of yesterday strapped into the cockpit beside you. And Emily Sorrel, Echo Tempest, was learning to carry them. What does it mean to lead when the storm no longer belongs to you alone? That was the question pressing on Emily's chest as her Raptor cut across the skis, 11 more behind her. For the first time, they weren't watching her with doubt. They weren't laughing at her call sign. They were trusting her to guide them. Trust was heavier than ridicule. Because ridicule you could ignore. But trust you had to live up to. Her radar pulsed. New contacts. Not a wave of 24 this time, but 6. Fast, aggressive, closing in from the south over open water. Control confirm, Emily called. 6 hostile aircraft, bearing 185, 20 miles out. Confirmed, came the reply. They're testing our response time, likely probing for weaknesses. Echo Tempest, you are flight lead, your call. The word stung. Your call. She had flown alone before. But this was different. Now 11 pilots waited for her voice. Every order she gave would put them in the crosshairs, or pull them home alive. For a second she hesitated. She thought of the 8 enemy fighters she had destroyed alone. How simple it had been in its own twisted way, her life for theirs, no one else at risk. But now, if she faltered, men she had just earned respect from would die. Her silence stretched long enough for Harlan's voice to cut in. Your lead, Commander, we're with you. She exhaled, steadying herself. All flights maintain formation. Do not engage until ordered. We'll force them to commit first. Her words were calm. Inside, her heart raced. The enemy jets drew closer. 6 red blips against the blue horizon. Her squadron tightened their formation behind her, engines growling, waiting. She thought of her father again. How he'd told her that leadership wasn't about being the loudest. It was about being the one people believed in, even when fear clawed at your throat. The hostiles split into 2 groups, 4 pressing high, 2 skimming low over the water. Bravo flight break high, Emily ordered. Delta flight track low. Her voice was steady. Her eyes sharp. The enemy climbed. Bravo intercepted, missiles streaking across the sky. 1 hostile exploded instantly. Another peeled off, rolling hard to escape. Splash 1, Carter called, his voice fierce. Emily's chest tightened, not from fear this time, from pride. But the fight wasn't over. The 2 low bogies dove, streaking straight toward the destroyer group stationed off the coast. Emily reacted without hesitation. Delta push hard, cut them off before they launch. Her Raptors screamed low across the waves, salt spray scattering in their wake. She tracked the lead bogey herself, targeting systems humming, missile-locked tone in her ears. She fired. The jet erupted in a bloom of fire above the sea, debris scattering harmlessly across the waves. But the second hostile slipped through. In the chaos, it broke formation, diving directly for the destroyer's deck. Emily's stomach dropped. Her missile systems were still cycling. She had seconds. Her hand gripped the cannon trigger. She dove after him, her Raptor screaming as she closed the distance. Tracer fire ripped through the sky, tearing the hostile apart just before he could release. The destroyer below remained unscathed. Her squadmates' voices filled the comms, sharp with adrenaline but edged with respect. "Nice shot, Tempest." "Clean work, Commander." The last two hostiles broke off, retreating south, unwilling to press further. "Do we pursue?" Mitchell called. Emily hesitated again. Every instinct screamed to chase, to finish it, to eliminate the threat before it could return. But another voice inside whispered caution. She looked at the formation spread behind her, at the men and women who had trusted her with their lives. "No pursuit," she said finally. "Maintain formation. Hold the line. We don't risk pilots for ghosts." There was no argument. Only silence, followed by a simple, unified response. "Copy that, Commander." The 6 enemy jets were gone. Her squadron remained intact. The ships below remained safe. It wasn't 8 kills in 2 minutes. It wasn't a miracle etched into legend. But it was something else, something heavier. It was leadership. Back on the runway, her squadmates gathered around, sweat still gleaming on their foreheads, adrenaline still pulsing in their veins. Carter spoke first. "You could have chased, you could have run us all south, why didn't you?" Emily met his gaze, her own steady, her voice as quiet as ever. "Because winning isn't always about killing. Sometimes it's about keeping people alive." The room stayed still for a long moment. And then Harland gave a single nod. "Lesson noted, Commander." For Emily, the praise didn't matter. What mattered was the silence that followed. Not the silence of dismissal, but the silence of understanding. She knew then, respect wasn't forged in the kills. It was forged in the choices no one else wanted to make. And though she still carried the ghosts of yesterday, she also carried something new. The weight of command. The burden of knowing that from this day forward, every storm wouldn't just be hers to face. It would belong to all of them. And they would follow her into it. What remains after the battles fade? That was the question lingering in the quiet days that followed. The smoke had cleared from San Diego. The wreckage had been pulled from the sea. Families had returned to airports, to offices, to beaches, never knowing how close death had come. The headlines praised the miracle. 24 enemy fighters destroyed, 0 civilian losses. But behind those words was the truth only a few would ever understand. The miracle had a name. Echo Tempest. Inside the squadron, the laughter had vanished. The ridicule gone. In its place, silence, but a silence filled with respect, the kind only warriors gave one another. Every pilot looked at her differently now. Not as the quiet recruit who barely spoke. Not as the woman they once doubted. But as the commander they trusted to bring them home. And yet, Emily herself felt none of the glory the world imagined. When she looked into the mirror, she didn't see the legend. She saw the faces of those who would never look back at their own reflections again. The enemy pilots she had destroyed. The men and women she hadn't been able to save, even in her victory. The weight never left. And perhaps it never would. One evening, after another long patrol, she sat alone at the edge of the runway. The sun dipped low, staining the horizon in red and gold, painting the tarmac in fire. Her helmet rested beside her, her hands clasped together. She thought of her father again, his words echoing softly. Combat isn't about who fires first, Emily. It's about what you carry when the firing stops. She understood now. She carried silence. She carried ghosts. But she also carried lives. The sailors who walked the decks of the carrier. The children who still laughed on the Ferris wheel. The families who still boarded planes, still dreamed of tomorrow. Behind her, footsteps approached. Harlan's voice, quiet now, almost gentle. "You still don't think you deserve it, do you?" Emily didn't look up. "I didn't win anything," she said softly. "I just kept people from losing." Harlan stood beside her, arms folded, eyes on the horizon. "That's what winning is, Commander. Not medals, not praise, keeping people alive." They stood in silence for a long while. No orders. No reports. Just two soldiers watching the sky they had bled for. The next day, the squadron rose again. 12 Raptors streaked into the blue, their formation tight, flawless. And at the front, always at the front, was Echo Tempest. Her voice carried across the comms, no longer faint, no longer lost in static. "Squadron, this is Tempest. We keep the skis clear. We keep each other alive. Let's bring it home." The responses came sharp. "Confident. Unified. Copy that, Commander." High above California, they flew together. A squadron reborn, bound not by bravado, but by the quiet strength of the storm that had saved them. And though Emily still carried her ghosts, she carried something else as well. The knowledge that sometimes the fiercest warriors are not the loudest. Sometimes they are the ones who endure in silence. The ones who never need to shout their worth. The ones who act when the world doubts them most. The city below would never know her face. The passengers at the airport would never know her name. The children at the pier would never hear her voice. But they would live. And that was enough. Because dignity doesn't always speak. Sometimes it simply acts. And in 8 minutes that rewrote history, a quiet storm named Echo Tempest had proved that truth in the skis above San Diego.